Hello, it's afternoon again, and it is a Monday again, and it is the 10th of January 22. And I've had a nice coffee with a friend, and I just thought, I read a bit more. It's a bit of therapy for me. I'm reading Bliss After Life, a story I started to write in 2006. Because I was traveling a lot, I had time, and I just sat down to write a story. And I continued writing it over 15 years. The first book was sort of finished in 2017. Sorry, I'm a bit vague because I didn't write down when I wrote what I wrote. I can now recognize this I am reading now I wrote about 4 years ago. It's the story about Bliss, who died at 95, and it is her continuation into the afterlife and her family who is involved, obviously, with her death. She was 95. I don't know whether I said that. Anyway, so Bliss After Life, because it is Bliss I'm writing about. And now this chapter is 103, and it's basically about the various people in the new year, which is 2012 in this story. When he wrote that song, she was backpacking in Australia. She suddenly thought that it was wonderful that the two of them, with all their experiences and lives which they lived over the last 30 years or so, that they found themselves together again now. It made her feel happy to know that they will be together for long. She felt quite sure of this and decided to leave it to the universe to work it all out, because she could not decide if she wanted to share her space all the time with another. She had enjoyed being married for a long time, but she felt at this moment it was best just to let things develop. Her imagination seemed to take her into all sorts of directions, and she found it hard to decide what she wanted in the long run. At this moment, she couldn't wait to see him. When she heard Chap, her dog, barking out of the window, she knew Steve had arrived, even before he rang the bell. She put Chap into the living room. She knew he would be excited to see Steve, but she wasn't going to let him spoil the first kiss. She smiled to herself when she jumped the stairs and opened the door just when he had arrived outside. He looked so happy, and he had a beautiful orchid in his hand. She stepped onto the bottom step and hugged his neck. It was so good to see him, and when he kissed her, she knew that he felt the same about her. Chap's barking became furious, and they both laughed. "Where is the little rascal?" He handed Silvana the plant and went to open the living room door. Patch was excited, licking his hands when Steve went on one knee to stroke the dog. "Well, this is a good beginning, because I would love you to look after him in March for a long weekend. Would you?" Silvana found herself glad she had blurted this out straight away. These two seemed to be getting on famously. "Yes, why not? I'm around in March. Sorry for being so quiet lately, but I was determined to get my second new album done before 30 years had passed." He laughed. He had almost become a hermit in the last 2 weeks, and Silvana was the first person he had contacted since he's gotten into his music. He had even ordered his groceries online and only went into the garden and on short early morning walks. After the new year, he had felt suddenly incredibly inspired, and although Silvana had much to do with that feeling, he needed some alone time. He found it hard to compose when there was too much going on around him. He had finished another piece this morning, and he had suddenly realized that he missed Silvana. In fact, he couldn't believe that more than 2 weeks had passed, and he had been glad that she was so understanding. "I have a much clearer mind now. I did text you last week. I know I was not very communicative. Thank you for understanding. I had this wave of inspiration, and somehow it felt that I wanted to get down to it and do some serious work." "It's fine, Steve. I was quite busy myself. You know that I love being by myself, but I had missed you a bit, to be honest. I really enjoyed those talks. I really enjoyed those taiko drummers, which we went to see, and I felt it was a bit of a contrast after we'd seen quite a bit of each other then." "Yes, I know." He took her into his arms. "I missed you too. I feel that more now than I did last week." He laughed. But it was true. and they had both talked about the need to be honest in this new relationship. He had gotten quite used to following his own whims over the last few years, and both of them had had a busy life. Silvana was so independent, but she had said for many years she thought that her marriage would last. She was romantic, and she had now realized that much of the romance in her partnership was her creation. When her now ex-husband worked over longer hours, traveling a lot, etc., she got used to being by herself with Poppy. When he was made redundant and spent most of his time at home, they soon realized that they had drifted apart. Thankfully, they both realized this quite quickly. Poppy had started commenting on their bickering and arguments. Although overall their separation had been relatively amicable, he had met Christina. It was not a secret for long. Being alone, Silvana remembered going through a period of real restlessness. The habit of marriage took a while to shed. They had talked of the time when being faithful was hard for him. He had been honest with her. He had changed much in the last decade, and he felt that they both appreciated each other's experiences and independence. "I think we are both a bit cautious, aren't we, Steve?" She held his face in her hands, and they looked into each other's eyes. He loved looking into her eyes. It was something he had not found easy in the past. Of course, he looked at people when he greeted them and during conversation, but he hardly ever held longer eye contact, like he did with Silvana. He felt such love for her. "The look of love is in your eyes," he started to sing, and she joined him. "The look of love is in your eyes." She joined him. He had the most beautiful eyes, she thought, and did indeed feel that she had not known that she had longed for this look for a long time. The CD had stopped, and they danced to their own tune. It all felt very right. Chapter 104. Melanie. Melanie felt spring in the air. February was finally over, and she loved March coming in. It would still be chilly, but there would be warm days already. She had been working hard on her course and was happy that she had almost completed her case studies. She was going to treat Tony this afternoon. They had seen much of each other in the last months. He had found work at a publishing company, was using his German a lot, and was happy and quite flexible in his working hours. She had her fixed hours in the shop and studied, but much of the time Tony had been at hers. He was great in helping her with reflexology. It was funny, as Ben had become quite interested in anatomy since he met Faye. They were laughing last weekend as Ben and Tony were discussing the benefits of holistic therapies, and both Melanie and Faye were listening in the kitchen, holding their mouths, because both felt that they got to the point of it all. They didn't want to interrupt, but their evening had been so interesting. Melanie had finally mentioned the communication she had from Mio, and no one was shocked. She had meant to talk to Tony for ages about it, because Mio had been quite active lately, but she never found the right moment. This last weekend they had all met at Bliss Place, and after they had overheard their conversations, which involved chakras and the things unseen, Melanie felt Mio so strongly that she just voiced what was coming to her. "Our meeting is the most blessed," she said, when they had all sat down to eat. They had all looked at her silently. Faye's eyes were wide, and Ben looked like he was holding his breath. Tony looked surprised. He felt immediately that this was not really Melanie, but he could not quite explain why. The way she spoke was different to her usual voice. "I hope we don't surprise you too much. Melanie was most reluctant to let us speak, but we feel you will appreciate meeting us. Are we right?" Melanie looked at them, but they could feel that all this was not their Melanie. A smile appeared when her face turned expectantly to Tony. Tony said, "Who are you?" "Yes, I am interested, and I know there was something Melanie wanted to say to me." Tony felt himself exactly like that, but his words had come out before he could even think of what he was going to say. "Yes, she has been pondering on this for some time. Thank you for noticing." "Tony, She is very fond of you, and the idea that you might think her loony was preventing her from telling you." They could not help laughing at this, because although it was Melanie talking, it was much more of a formal voice. The words could have been Melanie's. "I'm fascinated too," Faye heard herself saying. She was still puzzled, but it was true. She was fascinated. "So am I." Ben was suddenly excited. Since he met Faye, so much new information had come into his life. He had been open to hearing about acupuncture and the meridians and so on. He remembered his Omi talking about it when he was little, because he had some skin condition, and he overheard his mum, Holly, and his Oma discussing the various things they could use to make him better. He hadn't liked the idea of needles, and he reminded his Omi, saying that they were so thin he could not see them. These were acupuncture needles. Meeting Faye had brought it all back, and she told him much about the meridians in the body and general reasons for ill health. He knew Melanie was sitting at the table, but he also knew it was not her who was talking at this moment, and he was so interested what she would say. "Where is Melanie now?" Ben heard himself asking. "She is here." "She has stepped aside, for want of a better word. She can hear us, and I can see you." Another smile, this time for everyone around the table. "We are consciousness, no longer physical. We are a group. We have been observing Earth for a long, long time. Some of us have been incarnated many times on your beautiful planet. We have been friends with Melanie since she came back to Earth, and although she lives a normal life, we communicate with her, and as you can hear, through her. We love you all." Melanie felt the energy leaving her suddenly, and she felt herself back in her body, everyone looking at her expectantly. "Melanie!" Tony put his arms around her shoulders as he felt it was his girlfriend again, sitting around the table as if nothing had happened, although she blinked a few times and cleared her throat. "It is me." She leaned into Tony's arms and kissed him. "So, the cat's out of the bag." She blushed, but she did not really feel bad, more relieved that she'd just put herself out there, and she hoped that they would not freak out, a little embarrassed, as she had never felt so compelled in the past to let Mio do the speaking and take over. Now she had to tell them more. Tony's embrace felt so good, she knew he would understand, or at least try to. "I had an imaginary friend as a child. I know now that many children have them, but most are indeed just imaginary. Mine always felt more real to me. In fact, the feeling of their wisdom and authenticity was always clear to me, and as a child, it was not unusual for me to talk to myself. My mum and dad knew there was more to it, but neither encouraged nor discouraged me. My mum was often the shoulder I cried on when this communication got me into trouble or into embarrassing situation. I soon learned to keep quiet about it. Both my grandparents were very understanding. They never treated me differently. In fact, both liked to hear me, and I am free to be me when I'm with them." She looked at Tony. "I often felt like telling you, but it's a bit like an odd thing, isn't it? Schizophrenia springs to mind, and although I have learned my lessons in keeping quiet, I felt uneasy, and I did not talk to you because, I don't know, I didn't know how you would take it. The things which happened since Christmas, my grandmother and your grandmother having been friends, and all the other little things which happened to us, synchronicities, guided." She stopped. Suddenly it all felt too big in her mind, knowing that Faye would have a little girl, that they all connected. She did not want to be a fortune teller in any case. Mio was not forthcoming with predictions, because this is a planet of free will, and despite a blueprint, much can change the path. Sometimes it was much easier not to say anything and just live life as happy as can be. She knew that was not her path, though. "I promise to tell you more, but can we just eat and put some music on? I want to feel normal and have fun. I shall tell you things, by the by. Not go into a huge explanation of it all at once now. Can we?" She looked at all of them and didn't have to mention eating twice, as the boys already started to tuck in. Faye smiled at her. Yes, I totally agree. It's fascinating, Melanie, but I think we all need to chill. I shall put Tony's ankle on. She got up to put Steve's CD into the player, and for a little while it was quiet. Where's Mio now? Ben couldn't help asking, as he was more aware, as all of them were, of this moment when she was Melanie again. Everybody laughed. This is a good question, and I'm not even sure myself entirely. She laughed out. They're still here, though. She could sense Mio's smile inside her, and knew they were aware of the four of them sitting at the table. Wow, Ben was feeling vaguely awed. All the time? He had to get his head around that. Well, I had times in my life where I thought they were not there at all. I just wanted to live a normal life, and through my teenage years I never really tuned in. Tuned in? Ben was aware everybody had started to eat, and Melanie really wanted to change the subject, but he couldn't help himself. Melanie smiled. Don't worry, I don't feel bad talking about it. I just realized that it must all sound like way out there, when I feel it is so normal nowadays, to me anyway. I do not have to feel them around me, you know? I know that they are there. It's a vibe, it's an energy, like a sound. I have to clear my head and open myself to receive this vibe clearly, and then I ask questions. And are they always straight away there? Why was he so fascinated by it all? He looked around, and although he saw Tony and Faye eating, he knew that they were as interested as he was to hear what Melanie would say. Oh, Ben, Faye put her arms around Ben's shoulders. We are obviously all fascinated by what Melanie was saying, but let's eat and be with Melanie here and now. She smiled at him. Her thoughts had immediately centered on that morning she was up early and told Melanie about her dream. She herself really wanted to ask if Mio knew that her baby girl was a girl. And then, looking at Melanie, she could feel that Melanie had been thinking of it at the same time, and it was almost a relief when Tony burst into song, singing along with the CD, as he and Ben both knew this tune very well. Melanie laughed out loud, as she had been so startled thinking about how to explain what happened when she connected with Mio. Ben joined the song, and they all started talking at the same time about the music and the food and the sunshine, and all were aware that this was only the beginning of an interesting time they would all experience ahead. So, this was the ending of chapter 104, and I shall continue with 105 ASAP.